News just coming in. The new governor of the Reserve Bank of India will be Shaktikanta Das, a former government official, senior IAS member, and of course was at the helm of the government affairs, at least from the IAS side, when demonetization was announced. Joining us for quick thoughts on the way this entire thing has played out is Dr. Raghuram Rajan. He's joining us on the phone line. Dr. Rajan, this is Ira here. Thanks for taking our call. Dr. Rajan, yesterday was a shock, a surprise in some ways. Today they've announced a replacement. Your first thoughts, sir?
Well, Shaktikanta Das has been involved with economic affairs for a long time, and I'm sure that he will make a good governor. I'm glad that the government made a quick appointment, because any delay would result in the financial markets reacting in a way. Therefore, the appointment is welcome, and I think he should really now maintain the credibility and independence of Reserve Bank.
Dr. Rangarajan, I think people were wondering how an IAS governor appointment at this stage would be seen. I know that in the past we've had many governors from the IAS, very successful governors, but people were questioning whether it would be seen then as an appointment too close to the government. Should those concerns be raised, Dr. Rangarajan?
Well, there have been many IAS officers who have been governors of the Reserve Bank. But certainly I do hope that once he takes over charge as a governor of the Reserve Bank of India, he will become part of this new institution and try to maintain its independence, autonomy and credibility.
Dr. Rangarajan, how should they proceed on the issues that had cropped up between the RBI and the government? Now that there is a new person helming the RBI, should all of those issues be discussed afresh?
Well, there are some issues on which some understanding has been reached, and on the other issues, you should engage in a conversation and bring about an amicable settlement. But as I said, he is now in charge of a new institution, and he should live up to the standards which Reserve Bank of India has set up. And I do hope that the integrity and credibility and autonomy will be maintained.
All right, Dr. Rangarajan. Shankar Iyer is with us. He has a question for you.
Good evening, Dr. Rangarajan. You mentioned twice about the need to maintain the credibility and autonomy of the institution. So my question is that the fact that this has to be said, and said at this juncture, at the new appointment of an IAS officer chosen by the government, is that a sign of times, or are we going past the aberration that we saw?
Now, I think the appointment has been made, and therefore we can only talk about the task before Shaktikanta Das. And he has experience in economic affairs, and therefore he should be able to handle the problems which arise in the Reserve Bank, which are faced by the Reserve Bank. Therefore, and that is why I keep saying that once he has become part of this institution, it is his responsibility, if I may say so, the dharma, to maintain the integrity and autonomy of this new institution to which he has come.
Very well said, sir. That is the crucial word, dharma, of the institute. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rangarajan, for speaking to us. We launched directly into that conversation with Dr. Rangarajan because we had the time. But just to breathe and give you the news, a day after Niraj Patel stepped down, we have a new governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Shaktikanta Das has been named as the governor for a period of 3 years. Just to give our viewers a brief summary of who Shaktikanta Das is, most people who have followed economic news are familiar with him. He's a 1980 batch IAS officer from the Tamil Nadu cadre. currently a member of the 15th Finance Commission. Presumably he'll step down from that. He also represents India at the G20 in the role of the Sherpa. Again, presumably he'll step down from that. He was the Economic Affairs Secretary in the Government of India till May of 2017, and that is where he in many ways fronted the government's demonetization story. In fact, you'll all remember, Shankar, that one picture, in fact, is there on our website as well. Shaktikanta Das and Urjit Patel holding the new note together. At that point, there was a lot of criticism that the RBI was not fronting that decision, or at least explaining that decision, but Shaktikanta Das was.
Well, at least it took ownership of the decision. That was a government's decision, and the RBI implemented it. So in that sense, yes. And also the fact that he was able to have a conversation with the RBI and that he comes from the IAS stable is one positive. But we will have to wait for the market to see, because the market likes a bit of a bling on the person who is appointed as RBI governor. It likes to see the PhDs, it likes to see Ivy League institutions in the CV. And so how they view this appointment and how internally the RBI views the appointment, he's got a very tough task ahead of him, because the two deputy governors had actually been part of the narrative, part of the argument that Dr. Urjit Patel presented on the intervention by the government. And hopefully they will be able to work through this. This has been a very sordid chapter in the government-RBI relations.
Oh, absolutely. Let me get in more voices. Mr. D.K. Mittal is joining us on the phone line, former banking secretary in the Government of India. Mr. Mittal, thanks so much for joining us. Your thoughts? All right, I think we've lost Mr. Mittal. But, Shankar, actually, one of the very first things you said in the morning when we were discussing this is that we need the return of an IAS governor. Yeah. But there were reasons for that. I mean, it's not just about IAS or non-IAS, but there are reasons in the current context to have somebody who understands administration.
More importantly, there is a language code. So it is a software algorithm that works between the government and the Reserve Bank of India. So if you look back at moments of crisis, RBI has had IAS officers. In 1990-91, during the crisis, we had Sri S. Venkatramanan as the governor, and he took the bank and the country through. Very few people know that he would be actively watching the foreign exchange charts and instructing the State Bank of India to buy at different times and handle the entire pledging of gold. And one of his partners in that was Dr. Raghuram Rajan. Then you had the 2007, in the run-up to the 2007-2008 global financial crisis, you had one of the finest minds in Indian economic landscape, Dr. Y.V. Reddy, also an IAS officer who had handled the likes of N.T. Ramarao. So he had the ability to go through it. And he was followed by Dr. Subbarao, another IAS officer. So in that sense, I think it is important for the conversation between the government and the RBI. It is true that the RBI must be autonomous, but it is also true that the RBI cannot be a republic within the republic.
Yeah.
So the best course of action for both sides to have is to have a transparent system of what each side is looking at.
Yeah.
And this transparency sort of has been diminished since demonetization.
Yeah.
And this has to change for the system to work again, for both the software, both the institutions to talk to each other.
Yeah, on that point of demonetization, I think let the news settle into people who trade the markets, because I would be really curious to see how they read this. There is no taking away from the fact that Shaktikanta Das fronted that demonetization story. So is it once again, Shankar, going to be perceived as the government appointing or favoring people who were in support of demonetization, which is, it's contentious to say the least. It'll be very tough for him to banish that image of being the government's man during demonetization.
More important. Now, I've been saying it consistently since yesterday that I don't think the government was taken by surprise. I think this was an arranged exit or a discussed exit. Maybe the date of December 10 or 9 or 8 may not have been discussed, but that Dr. Urjit Patel would leave after the elections was known, which is why the arrival at the decision has not taken very long, which is why, I mean, the interesting thing is at 3 o'clock today, the Finance Commission was supposed to have a press conference on 1 year of the Finance Commission. The press conference was cancelled around that an hour before that. And in my conversations, I found out that Shaktikanta Das was resigning from the post in Finance Commission, was also resigning as the Sherpa. And so the pre-planning of this event and the post-planning of this has been in sync. And now his biggest burden will be that he comes as the chosen one to address the issues the government has been raising. And he was the chosen one when demonetization was done.
It's going to be a tough one.
It's a big burden on him to be, and so I think his first task is not to get into the independent or autonomous issue, the argument of being independent or autonomous, but deal with issues autonomously.
Absolutely.
I think there's a lot of difference.
There's a huge difference there, and if he tackles each of those individual issues, I think he will probably be able to establish his legacy. Too early to say, but he start establishing his legacy as an RBI governor. And it's important to remember that when Dr. Subba Rao came into the RBI office, these were the exact same concerns in many ways. I mean, demonetization apart, that were raised about him, that he was too close to the government, that will he be the government's man in the Reserve Bank of India? It took about a year, and I think by the time the first year had ended, a lot of people had changed their views of Dr. Subba Rao.
Yeah, I mean, most people had a issue in the sense that he was in the system a largely low-profile person. Very few people knew that he was highly regarded by both Dr. Manmohan Singh and Dr. Rangarajan. He was the secretary of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council before he became Finance Secretary. And he's a very simple person. And then he came to fill the boots of somebody as a colossus like Dr. Y.V. Reddy. So it was a tough task. And then he had the crisis. But the crisis maketh the man, the moment maketh the man. And he proved himself. And then he also, in the latter stages, resisted the government's advances, the pressure from Chidambaram and Pranab Mukherjee to reduce rates and take their dictation, so to speak. So I think it is always going to be a challenge for Shaktikanta Das, that the people will always see him in the perspectives of first his role during demonetization, and second, his choice now in the middle of all this. And it's a big burden to carry. It's a big chip to carry on your shoulder. I mean, the genealogy is very tough for him.
Yeah, no, and there's a crisis of a different nature, I guess, that we are currently in the midst of, which is the crisis of ensuring that nobody believes that the RBI is not independent and that its autonomy has not indeed been challenged. We're lucky to have with us in the studio Neelkanth Mishra of Credit Suisse. This is a lucky coincidence, I suspect, but we'll take it as it is. Neelkanth, your thoughts? We had a surprise resignation, well, surprise to some extent. We've got a new governor already.
Yeah, I felt that if the government quickly announced a replacement who was credible, who was non-controversial, I think the markets would take comfort. And then the decision making and the analysis would focus on what are the next steps and start looking forward. I think there is a lot of institutional continuity. So at least on the interest rate side, there is a monetary policy committee which has already signaled the direction of inflation forecasts. In fact, the outgoing governor himself had signaled something on inflation. So there is a lot of continuity, and so long as there is a non-controversial person who comes in who can actually work with the government, I think the situation should calm down over time.
Does Shaktikanta Das meet that bill?
I think it does. I think he has been very much part of the government. He knows how the government machinery works. And I think having that channel, which I think Shankar was also talking about, ongoing is a very important part of just keeping that debate ongoing, because once the conversation starts or stops, I think stresses start building up.
All right, I'm just going to interrupt you for a minute. Satish Marathe, member. All right, I think we've lost him. We were trying to get Satish Marathe of the RBI Central Board. But, people are surprised at today's lack of market reaction in some ways. There was some reaction in pre-open and then markets calmed down. And one theory doing the rounds was that markets were hoping that a new governor would come in. There would be looser monetary policy, perhaps a more dovish governor, easier banking regulation. This is just random market talk, isn't it?
Market, you think about from the perspective of an investor holding a bank stock, right? And why would he change the decision, right, to not hold a stock? As I said, because of the MPC, there is institutional continuity. We know the direction in which interest rates are headed. On all the contentious issues, there is some clarity. So the dividend issue has now been put to a committee. That's not going to change. There is, on the PCA side, I mean, the PSU banks did such a terrible job in September quarter that it's very unlikely anyone is going to pick them up. The 40,000 crores of OMO a month has been well guided too. The only thing we don't know about, and which is the markets hate uncertainty.
Neelkanth, can I please interrupt you? I'm sorry. Satish Marathe, member of the RBI Central Board, on the phone line with us. Mr. Marathe, thanks for taking our call. Sir, your thoughts on a new governor and how you see the whole situation sort of moving forward. First question, is the board meeting still on this week?
Yes, I hope so. There is no communication that it has been either cancelled or deferred. So I believe it will be held on 14th.
So the same issues, Mr. Marathe, you would expect to be discussed, including the governance of the Reserve Bank of India. Would you not expect that a new governor would need to come in, take stock of things? So should these issues, my question is, be now reconvened once the new governor manages to frame his thoughts?
See, the agenda has been circulated. If the governor feels he needs time, those can be deferred and taken up at the subsequent meeting. It's not a big thing.
Mr. Marathe, how did the board see the resignation of Niraj Patel? After the last board meeting, a lot of people off record told us that it was cordial, yet the resignation came in a shock manner in some ways.
Yes, I don't know why. We are all surprised and saddened, to be honest. We never expected this to happen.
Has there been any discussion with Dr. Patel since his resignation?
No, I have not been able to talk to him.
Mr. Marathe, there was a rumor doing the round. Sorry to ask you about a rumor, but there was a rumor that Dr. Viralacharya may step down as well. Has the board had any conversations on whether the second rung, the deputy governors, are comfortable in how things stand?
Session of that time, and I'm not over the design.
All right, Mr. Marathe, thanks so much for that quick reaction. That's Satish Marathe. To both of you, this central board issue has not gone away. I think there's still a whole lot of contentious issues which, as Mr. Marathe said, are going to be taken up. So the problems, the core of the problems remains, whether you have an old governor or a new governor.
The core of the question remains. Whether it is a problem or not, we will know
Depend on the answer.
On the answers that come through. So one of the things is many reports have been summoned. I mean, the board has said we will, the XYZ committees are going to decide on XYZ issues. Now, the chances earlier, I mean, presumably was there would be a contest on the acceptance of these recommendations because the committees are largely loaded the board side, not so much as the governor or deputy governor side. So how does the solution get presented now? Earlier, you would have thought there would be a contest. Now there would be a presumption that it wouldn't be contested. In both sides, both presumptions are wrong, really, because the contest should be on the merits of the case being presented. And this aspect now has a different angularity because Mr. Shaktikanta Das comes with the perception that he is aligned to the interests of the government. And which is why Dr. Rangarajan kept insisting that he would, it is
grow
dharma.
The institution.
It's dharma to maintain the credibility. And anybody who takes over this institution must recognize that, for their own credibility, and this is one of the finest institutions in India, Reserve Bank of India.
Yeah.
And among the developing economies, it's probably the only institution, central bank, that has actually a global voice at global meets. Not just now, for many decades now.
Sure.
Because of the quality of people, the quality of research, the quality of integrity that it has maintained.
Yeah.
So it would necessarily, again, once I say it necessitates that the decisions and there should be a white paper approach to the decision making now, that they should have buy-in of the people the buy-in of the government, the executive, and buy-in of the Reserve Bank.
Okay.
And I think if that process is taken, I think it will restore the credibility of the. See, it's done by the U.S. Federal Reserve.
Yeah.
It's not something. I mean, the Jerome Powell or before him, Janet Yellen used to go to the Senate Banking Committee, and it was an open process.
Sure.
This is what we need here now going forward. In a much more complex world, you need to have much more information and analysis.
Okay, Neelkanth, I need to let you go to the election analysis, which is what you had come here for, but a quick word from you. So what will the markets be watching from here on? Individual decisions on, say, PCA, Feb 12 circular, or what?
I don't expect that those will be things that the government will really put pressure on. There is already a decision taken in the board meeting on the 19th. I don't think that happens. I think the issues around the role of the RBI's board itself and how should we re-architect and should we rethink the individual focused approach of the RBI versus a more consensus. Like, even when the MPC was set up, there was a debate that, should it not just be the RBI governor who decides, why should there be 6 people sitting and making a decision? But over time, and hopefully as the MPC matures, the secretariat grows up, we will find that having an institution, having 6 people taking decisions together is perhaps a more stable way of taking decisions. So it is quite possible. It's important to have that debate, and perhaps that debate will be tricked off. I hope there is no hurried decision taken, and I don't expect that will happen.
All right, Neelkanth, thanks so much. Happy coincidence, as I said, to have you in the studio on this important announcement. I'm going to once again recap for viewers joining us right now on the news. Shaktikanta Das is the new RBI governor. The announcement came in just minutes ago. He is a veteran IAS officer, was with the government when demonetization was announced, will now move into Mint Street. Of course, a whole host of contentious issues to be discussed and debated before Shaktikanta Das takes a decision. Shankar, quick word from you on what of this, say 12 decisions which were being talked about, which were the, sticky points between the government and the RBI. Is it still the reserves that you will watch most closely for his stance on, or will it be the governance now of the central board?
I would watch the output of these committees and the stance of the governor vis-a-vis the previous stuff. The one good thing that we must recognize is that the rancor, the kind of hostility that existed in the previous regime is not there. So there will be a conversation that would force through. There is one more point that we must recognize, that today's market also played flat and then went down and then flat and then sort of popped up in the green. Is on the hope that the BJP hadn't done as badly as it was expected to do. Oh. And now that the coffee is brewing and the smell is sort of smelling, the aroma is spreading, I think the market would recognize that 3-0 or 2-1 is not that great a score to work with. Now, this will find reaction in the market tomorrow. So the reaction in Dalal Street could be, but should not be confused with the new appointment on Mint Street. I think this is some area, and the rupee also may sort of react to what happens on Dalal Street. And there will be a common interpretation mistake that will happen, is that a lot of this would be attributed to the appointment of Shaktikanta Das as Reserve Bank governor. But it has to wait till he takes charge and takes a decision.
No, I think the point you made earlier was very important because, there is now perhaps thinking that he will work well with the government because, of his association with the government. The question, as you raised, how will he work with the RBI team? Because, some of the positions taken by Viralacharya and DG Vishwanathan were very aligned with what Niraj Patel thought.
And you don't know
positions.
And you don't know whether Shaktikanta Das agrees with it or what his thoughts are. And he, that he was the Sherpa for the G20, brings an exposure of a different order to his thinking, and that might actually, that exposure will visit his decision making in the RBI. So we may not necessarily conclude that he would be more receptive to the government side and less to the RBI side. And this actually creates a very fine middle ground to walk past.
And he has not weighed in officially on any of these issues. So I was, looking to see when there was speculation that he may come in as the next governor. He has not made any public comments on any of these issues because he was in a different role, right? He was in the Finance Commission. He was the G20 Sherpa. So we haven't heard him talk about reserves or prompt corrective action or the RBI governance. So he doesn't have a stated position on it. Is my simple point.
I also think that is very deliberate, that he, even as when he was in the finance ministry, one has not seen him sort of stir out of his domain. Okay, one has seen him being overly optimistic.
Yes.
And almost applaudatory in the sense on some policy decisions of the government, which was a little surprising, but he didn't stay out of his stay. Now here's, as Reserve Bank governor, he has to weigh in on both what the Reserve Bank is doing and also weigh in on what the government is doing. And so probably the next bi-monthly policy document will give us a sense of those thoughts that he have. You see, the Economic Affairs Secretary is not a free person.
That's true. No, actually on that point about the next monetary policy, as I said in the morning as well, I think the silver lining in all of this is that, I don't think anybody can speculate about the continuity of monetary policy to a large extent, right? But it's the banking policy that becomes far more important.
No, also the commentary on what the government policy is going. So if this loss of 3 states or 2.5 states, whatever, will visit policy in the next month or so, and then you have an interim budget, I dare say that there will be policy changes. There will be more of the Telangana pink color in the saffron budget. So I have a feeling that those issues will come up. When successive governors have frowned upon loan waivers, successive governors have frowned upon the kind of forbearance that was being asked for. And as Neelkanth said, I think the performance of the nationalized banks in the last quarter should put a halt to any demand to relaxation of PCA, because now, as I said in the morning, that now you have to consider that 105 trillion rupees of public money is at stake here.
No, absolutely. Last question to you, Shankar, and then perhaps we'll take a break and come back, which is exactly linked to the elections. Given what has happened in the elections today, do you think that there will be more pressure on the government to now actually do something to, for instance, if they feel that the problem is agrarian stress, will there be pressure for them to do something there? Will there be pressure for them to loosen fiscally without actually giving up that 3.3% target, which could mean, SME lending, so sort of a circuitous route to pushing up the economy? Will there be more pressure?
So let me park this. I mean, I'll stick my neck out, and I don't think the fiscal deficit can be maintained at 3.3.
3.5. 3.5.
Yeah,
even 3.5 would be acceptable.
So my estimation is somewhere near 3.6, 3.7. Final tally would be there. Okay. Because that bus has left the station. Okay. Now, what we see as the problem may not necessarily be the problem that the government, the party sees. Forget the government. So the party will see the defeat as the problem, not the agricultural distress or anything as a problem. So here is the cause of the problem will be identified. Now, is the defeat due to agrarian distress, large-scale disillusionment, or anger about GST, SMEs not getting credit, or demonetization? Or it's something else. That is something the party will come together and understand and agree upon, and the policy response to it. I think the challenge before the BJP is to try and understand whether it is their Vikas narrative that will work further, or they need to reinforce the welfare narrative, or should they try and glue everything together under the Hindutva narrative. This is the challenge now.
All right.
And both have ominous portents for the economy.
All right, Shankar, you're not a bundle of joy today, but thanks so much for your analysis. Really lucky to have had you in the studio. Neeraj Gambhir, a veteran of the Indian financial markets, joining me on the phone line. Neeraj, how do you see the events of the last 24 or a little bit more than that hours? A governor stepping down, a new governor appointed.
But I think the best part is that we have a new appointment, and so there is the uncertainty is over, and the new person who's been appointed is actually a very seasoned bureaucrat and has seen all sides of economic policy making for quite a long period of time. So in that sense, I think the fact that the uncertainty is over is a positive for the markets. From here onwards, I think the focus will be on how some of these crucial issues that have been bone of contention between the government and the RBI will be resolved. And obviously, there will be a lot of focus on how the central bank independence will be maintained, given the fact that Mr. Das has worked for a fairly long period of time in the government.
All right. Niraj, request you to just hold the line with us. Mr. Amitabh Kant is with us on the phone line. Mr. Kant, your reaction to Shaktikanta Das, somebody who you worked with closely, being appointed as the Governor of the Reserve Bank of India?
So I've known Shakti for a very, very long time. He was my classmate in St. Stephen's College, Delhi. Subsequently, when I got Kerala cadre and he was in the neighboring Tamil Nadu cadre. So my view is that nobody in India today has the kind of experience of finance which he has. He's been, he's managed state budgets for a very long time. Subsequently, he did Government of India budgets for an inordinately long period of time. He's been Secretary Revenue for a very long period, and then he has been Secretary Economic Affairs. He's been a member of the 15th Finance Commission. He was a Sherpa, so he has global experience. He has national level experience. He has state level experience, and more than anything else, he's a great consensus builder. He's very matured, very seasoned. He's a very, very good team leader, and that's what you need at this point of time. You don't need, he brings tremendous credentials to this job, and he'll add immense value to this job, I can assure you.
Mr. Kant, playing devil's advocate, but there will be questions asked as to whether the government is appointing someone who is close to them. Shaktikanta Das was there when demonetization was announced, fronted it along with a whole lot of you in many ways. There will be questions raised whether, in some ways the government is once again pushing into the RBI. What would you say to those questions?
Oh, he's a very, very professional. He's been a very, very professional civil servant. I can assure you that he'll play a very critical role in ensuring the autonomy of RBI. He'll also go for growth. He'll also ensure that there is liquidity in the system. But I can assure you that he'll fully take care of RBI's interest. He will manage all this in a very distinguished manner. I have just no doubt of that.
Mr. Kant, thanks for that quick reaction. I'm going to go across to Niraj Gambhir. Niraj, actually the same question to you. The markets will be pondering over whether an appointment which is too close to the government has been made at a time when there is a lot at stake. These are not ordinary times in the relationship between the RBI and the government.
Well, I think the fact that a person who's worked with this current government in a very crucial time has been appointed at the Reserve Bank to head the Reserve Bank by itself doesn't mean that he's going to toe the line. I think we'll have to see over the next few months, as some of the contentious issues that have been, that have been sort of being discussed, how they get resolved. I think in some senses, Mr. Das has to sort of probably rebuild the credibility of the institution, and it's really in that direction that the markets will be closely watching as to how Reserve Bank acts over a period of time.
Niraj, what specifically will the markets be watching apart from sort of the dynamics of the relationship? Are the reserves issue, which you wrote about, going to be sort of, the big red flags, or are actually markets going to watch for slightly more subtle cues about how policy could change? For instance, today in the bond markets, as speculative as was, people were wondering whether a new governor will be more dovish, inflation is low, could open the room for perhaps a change in stance. Is any of that conversation justified?
So there are multiple issues here, but let me try and take some of them one by one. First is the issue of monetary policy. That I think is now exclusively in the domain of MPC, and Mr. Das obviously is the chair of the MPC now. But it's a 6-member committee, so there is a bit of a committee approach there, which I think will ensure that the MPC is focused on the inflation target. So I don't think there is a big change coming up just because we have a change in the governor as far as the interest rate policy is concerned. The second and more important and serious issue is of RBI's capital. I think a middle path needs to be found. And I had, in my article, I had given in explicit detail as to what are the factors that affect, how do you judge the adequacy of a central bank's capital. And given the kind of challenges that Reserve Bank faces, particularly holding very large amount of reserves and the volatility of those reserves, I think a scientific and more acceptable method of ascertaining those reserves needs to be, put in place, and then it has to be acceptable to both the government as well as the Reserve Bank management. So I think how fast they can act towards that is going to be one of the crucial issues. And finally, it's a question of what kind of banking regulation you want to have in place, and what kind of banking sector, management and consolidation do you want to have in place. Given the fact that this government has very little time left, I don't expect any big changes, but certainly some changes at the margin which could help these banks to sort of start doing the business again could be expected. So I think that there is a very careful balance that needs to be struck between what the government wants, what is the requirement of the economy, and what is rightfully the Reserve Bank of India's concern with regard to the capital as well as the lending practices of these banks.
All right, Niraj, thank you so much for taking the time to share your perspective on the developments of the day. I'm just going to mention that the currency in the NDF markets is trading weaker. May not want to put too much attention to that. It was trading weaker yesterday as well, plus the election results to digest too. And I think, as all of our guests have said, and we've made this mistake in the past. You have somebody who's been in government gets appointed to the Reserve Bank of India, you automatically assume that the person is going to be too close to government. So I think you must give Shaktikanta Das the benefit of the doubt. He comes in to the Reserve Bank of India. He has not voiced his views on any of the contentious issues. We'll wait to see how he actually, which side he moves on. And also it'll be important for him to sort of build the team within RBI. He's been, well versed with relationships with the government officials. He has to now take that and build relationships with the RBI and the RBI deputy governors in particular. You're watching Bloomberg Quint. We are covering live the news that Shaktikanta Das is the 25th governor of the Reserve Bank of India. Do go to bloombergquint.com to read all about it.